So I see the comments all the time on my videos of you guys looking and asking,
how the hell do you do that? So in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can go from this, hey, what's that supposed to mean, man? To this. Let's get straight in. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to learn is some basic simple tricks that I'm going to show you that are just little things you need to practice, little movements that I think will really help. And just to clarify, guys, I understand Blade and Sorcery is not a difficult game, we all know that, but if you want to get better and look better while playing the game and have a lot more fun, feeling fucking awesome, then this is the video for you. Let's go. Okay, so my first tip would be find the weapon that suits you. Now, a lot of people don't like two-handed weapons, and for an easier, newer person or someone who's getting used to the movement of the game, I would always go with a one-handed sword. The riding sword is a perfect one. The reverend sword, all those kind of weapons are beautiful for this kind of stuff. But I recommend the riding sword as a starting sword. It's got good maneuverability, it's got great piercing, and it just looks incredible. So, one thing I would get used to doing is your first thing out of anything is just get used to flipping your weapon, because that's really important. Honestly, like how the amount, I mean, there we go, I did it there. It's just, you can throw the weapon away really easily. I see so many people try and do that and miss. If you want to do it, just basically you just want to turn your hand and let go, and there you go, and you can just flip the weapon over and over and over, and then you can start getting good and, like, you know, flipping it like that. And don't forget, you can still grab with telekinesis if you take it too far, so it's not the end of the world. Now I have icons turned off for videos, so you guys can't actually see that, and I can't see that, so this makes it a little harder for me, but, you know, I played the game enough where I've got the hang of the movement of your weapon, and every weapon's weighted differently, so you need to learn that, and that's one of my first things I would get used to, if you want to get good at weapon handling. Because if you miss a slash sideways, you want to be able to flip the weapon to stab backwards, and then flip back and come back to here, you know? You want to be able to have that maneuverability to attack. Okay, well now that's the first thing down. The next thing I think that is really important to learn is the enemy's attack patterns. Now, enemies have about 5 or 6 different common attacks that they use, and I'm going to show you some of them now. So, what you want to do is just spawn an enemy with the NPC spawner spell, I'll link that in the description, and you just want to get used to blocking up, side, or down. So there are a few different things. You want to block here, 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 and up. Learning your spacing is incredibly important. You want to learn how to be out of range and get into range quickly. That's a really important thing in Blade and Sorcery. Highly recommend that you guys learn that spacing. And different weapons have different spacing. Most of them are around the same range as the War Axe. Enemies can't use two-handed weapons yet, so you're not going to have incredible range against them. But, see, here's an example, the Rapier. We can practice our blocks here. You can see that was 3 upward blocks in a row. Now I might do another upward one. There's a side one. And you just want to practice blocking as much as you can until you get the hang of defending yourself. And once you think you're good, you can kill off that enemy and try and spawn someone else with a different weapon, like another riding sword. And we can kind of just practice blocking, getting out of range, like that. And that is probably, I would say, the most important tip is learn to defend yourself. Obviously, if you want to have a shield, you can, but a lot of people just like to use the sword, and I think that's what's important. So, definitely get used to that. Okay, well now we've gone through some more of the basic tips, I think maybe we should get into how you should attack enemies, where you should attack enemies, and when to attack enemies. So let's get into that and get into a bit more of the advanced movement and combat tactics. So our first thing is obviously movement. You want to be moving up, down, to the side. If you have the space to do so, you want to be crouching in real space. If you have a small room like I do, if you guys saw the room I record videos in, you'd be very surprised at how I manage this. But you can use the virtual crouch to get yourself down, and I'll give some examples of that now. So what you can actually do is use that to kind of get low, and get lower on your enemies. For example, you can actually use it to avoid attacks as well, like that, and then you can come in for the slash up above. And you can repeatedly just practice your movement like that. See how I ducked and tucked the back of his leg out before finishing him off. And you can kind of practice that. Another way to practice movement is kind of countering round the side, like that. Coming around the side is an important way of movement, like getting to the side of an enemy where they can't attack you, to then finish them off. It's a great way of doing it. So that's why movement's important. Very important. You can also use it to your advantage to jump as well. Jumping in on an attack can really help. If you can get in with a jump, I highly recommend trying it. Okay, next tip, kicks. Now the reason kicks are important is because you can use them to imbalance your enemies. So if you block and kick, see how his guard went completely down after that kick? You can knock out someone's guard very easily. So we'll do that again, just to show again. Block, she dodged the kick there. So, there we go, and straight in. And now if I would have tried to do that before, I may have landed the stab, but they may have moved their weapon in front. Whereas when you kick them, they're too stunned to do anything, you can deal with them. And it works great in combination with, like, slashing, kicking, slashing. You can really do that kind of stuff, and it's fantastic. I really enjoy comboing the kicks into movement. It just works so well. So I highly recommend doing that as well. Now the next tip I have for you is learning your weak points. Now, for this little movement, I'm gonna throw out a dummy here, and we're gonna show off some things you might want to learn, some things that are quite important. So, weak points on the dummies, or on enemies in general. So weak points on enemies are the center of the chest, the neck, the head, and can be the legs. Now also, I would tend to also say that the right arm, which is what most enemies hold their weapons in, is a weak point, and this is why. Completely disarms them if you hold their weapon. So then you can grab their weapon, hit them in the neck, and that should finish them off. So, disarming is a very, very viable way of killing an enemy, but also, you can just go for the head or the neck. You can go for decapitations. Limbs without mods, if you cut a limb off, it will kill the enemy too. Going for legs is also a very viable way of taking an enemy down. I would say the only place you don't really want to stab is like the unarmed arm here, because it's not going to do a whole lot. And like the shoulders again aren't not that viable unless you want to disarm. The shoulders are not really going to do a whole lot, and you can just go for the arm, which is a far easier and more out-sticky part. So I would focus on that. But yeah, I think that's mostly the weak points. You can also, if you can manage to get behind the enemy, take them down from behind with their legs. So that's another important thing, especially with the bigger weapons, sweeping handles and things like that. Very important to focus on that. Anyway, let's move on to the next set of tips. So for this segment, and excuse the incredibly bloody face, I'm not sure what happened there, we're going to talk about magic, because I feel like magic is completely underutilized, and it is so cool in this game, and we really need to be using it to our full advantage. So let's use the magic. So the first thing I'm going to talk about when it comes to magic is imbues. Now, the imbues do 3 different things. Fire is probably the most useful of the imbues, and what you can do with the fire imbue is if you head over to a wall, you can now pierce walls. Now why is that useful? Well, if you want to climb, it is now far easier to climb. Sometimes it's hard to jam it in, but yes. You can now climb and hold yourself on the wall, and I think that's a really important thing to learn. Mostly because it's just really useful for getting around certain dungeons. If you're running at a wall and you're going to miss the jump, you can jam that weapon into the wall and you're safe, and then you can kind of figure out where you want to like grab from there and try and save yourself. So I think that's really important. Now, the next imbue is gravity. Now gravity allows you to do a few different things. Gravity on arrows actually allows you to shoot arrows without any fall off, so that's an important one, I would say. Gravity on weapons makes them float. And why is that useful? Well, if you're going for some crazy move, you can let go of your weapon and it will just keep floating. So you can kind of hold your weapon there, do some punches, punch people up, and then grab your weapon back. So you can leave your weapon there, punch an enemy up, grab them, grab your weapon back, and stab them. And I would say that is an incredibly important thing. And speaking of grabs, grabbing an enemy on the head or other places is so useful because you can just lift them up. So like I said, you can leave your weapon floating, punch, 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 grab your weapon back, and it just works so nicely. You can join the pile of bodies over there. So that is why gravity is incredibly useful. Not to mention, it just completely makes enemies float. if I then throw the enemy up in the air, he's gonna float around, which is really funny because you can like hit an enemy like that, and then what I can do is while he's floating, just send him off into the abyss. It's really cool, and I really recommend you try out using some of these imbues. And our last imbue is lightning. Now lightning is useful for many reasons. The main reason is stun. If you hit an enemy with lightning, they're gonna fall straight to the ground. And I think that's really useful in a lot of ways, because, I mean, it completely disarms your enemy at the time. It makes them completely useless if they get electrocuted. I don't see why you wouldn't use this imbue. It's more of like a disabler imbue, and I think it's incredibly useful when it comes to big groups. So if I have like 3 enemies with an imbue weapon, I can go 1, 2, and then I can just deal with you. I don't have to worry about you at all until you get back up. But it gives me enough time. I think that's what's important. Okay. I think it's time we move on to our next set of tips. So this set of tips is all going to come about traversal. Now I've already told you about being able to stab walls with imbued fire weapons, but if you just grab onto any sharp corner or edge, you probably already know this, but you can climb anywhere. And now learning where you can climb is an important thing. As you can just see, I slid off there, but you can really learn where you can climb and use it to your advantage, especially in dungeons. I almost had it. It's quite a difficult wall to climb, but this is what we did when this came out, when this big tower in this map came out. We all used it to practice our climbing skills, and there are actually areas, if you look around in Blade and Sorcery, there's always these rocks on the side of walls that are used to practice climbing. Again, you can almost climb any sharp edge, any kind of edge on an item or object. Now, I believe they've changed this. This used to be a bumpy wall, and they've changed it. If you go and look at my old video, there it is. No, it's not. They've removed it. Okay, so let's do the little climbing bit over here instead. So, obviously there are ladders to help you. That much is obvious. We've all messed around with the ladders, but here we go. There are some rocks sticking out, and you can kind of use these to climb. And it's something really important I recommend learning. It's just like the way you can traverse with climbing. Like that. And then we can get to here and kind of throw ourselves up. Get your arms up here, grab on. Come round. Get yourself at a good angle. And throw yourself up again. And it's as easy as that. And I really recommend practicing and learning that. It's an incredibly useful thing to learn. And this, right now, what I'm doing, leads us on to our next segment. So I think it's time to learn use of magic in combat. Now, there are 4 different ways I like to use magic in combat, which are the 3 base spells with their staffs, which I'm not going to show off the staffs. You guys already know what the staffs do. They're pretty cool. But there's always one that people forget. I think it's really useful to know. And that's telekinesis. Now this thing is powerful. Let's go. So, the reason telekinesis is so powerful is because you can grab any object and you can just find an enemy, anyone that's causing you problems, and wipe them out. And any object will normally take down an enemy, even if it's just a basket. The force that you're putting behind it usually is enough to kill. And if it's not, you can just do it again. And there are so many heavy items that you can mess around with. Like, look at this. I can bring the whole cart here, and then knock him down with it. And then I could even pick the cart back up. I could even lift the cart way into the sky, I believe. Okay, yeah, never mind, I can't do that. But I can still wipe him out with the cart. And that's something really important. Now, we all know about the different gravity effects. You can fly, you can glide, so make sure you use that to your advantage before you do that. So you can push, hover, and then you can push like that. So if you get too far away from an enemy, 1 gravity push just isn't going to cut it. If you do 2, it definitely does the job. So 1 gravity push to destabilize, 2 to knock back. I think that's something you really need to make sure you learn when it comes to using the magic in this game. Very important. Another thing is fire. Fire, you can control the fireballs, we all know that. And I think that's a really important thing to practice as well. Because if you have an enemy way over there, right? Let's throw an enemy out of there. you can actually take long range enemies out with a fireball spell from here. And that's a really important thing, because I would not hit that shot with a bow, but because I can control it, it's very useful. Now lightning is really just a lone thing in this, whereas you can stun people with it, but also obviously you have your crazy lightning beam, which is actually ridiculous. Like, it is insane. Does a lot of damage, and I can't wait to see more people using the lightning in kind of combat, where you just have your lightning and you just kind of zap, slash, electrocute your own weapon, zap, that kind of thing. I feel like it'd be really cool to see a lightning warrior, which I haven't really seen many people do, even though lightning's been in the game the longest. So, whoever makes cinematic videos, get on that. I'd love to see a lightning warrior video. Absolutely. And with that, I think we move on to our last tip. Not my last and most important tip, I would just say, is enjoy the game. Just enjoy the game. Enjoy it how you want to play, you know? If you like playing in slow-mo, don't let anyone shame you for that. If you want to have fun pressing slow-mo and just doing some practice with it, even with, like, one thing I've noticed is the more slow-mo videos I've done, I've gotten so good at countering. One thing I've noticed is the more slow-mo videos I've done, I've gotten so good at countering outside of slow motion. It's insane. Like, if I go back to this, disarmed, out of slow-mo. You don't need slow-mo once you've used enough of it, and I think that's the important thing to learn, is that after practicing in slow-mo, you get way better at learning the enemy movements, and you don't need the slow motion to block. And it becomes really fun. Once you can do what you can do in slow-mo, in full speed, it becomes an incredibly fun game. And I think with that being said, you can see how bloody I am as a seasoned veteran at this point, so I think you guys understand that is how you play Blade and Sorcery. And now, you're a pro. Enjoy. Go play the game. Why are you still doing it? Go, bye. Go play.